This is an oral history interview with Alice Hatch by Allison Metzner, conducted on April 10th, 1984, at Alice Hatch's home at 1145 Walnut Street, Newton Highlands, in Massachusetts. This interview is conducted as part of the Newton Highlands Oral History Project of the Newton Highlands Branch Library, and the general subject areas we will be covering is the working in Newton Highlands between 1920 and 1950. Okay. Well, when did you first move to Newton Highlands?
Oh, I was born in Newton Highlands. As a matter of fact, just a few houses from here.
Oh.
On the same side of the street.
Uh-huh.
And at age 3, we moved to this particular location. And I think I feel that I know that original house because from pictures.
Right.
I can see myself sitting there.
Uh-huh.
And even now when I walk by, I have that feeling somebody is in my house.
How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? But, so this house here, I've been more or less in this vicinity for that many years, having perhaps been away from here during the school years and then while I was married.
Okay. And where did you go to school? Was it?
Well, as far as grammar school was concerned, I went to high school. This is at the moment, the project here to keep the high school from closing, and we were all signing petitions, and we were all tucking petitions under our arms and so forth. And it does seem too bad because it does seem to be so much of the community.
Mm-hmm. Did you walk or have to?
No, we're located here so closely. We could just, matter of 5 minutes.
Right.
Okay, and then there was no junior high at the time that I was, so we went to Newton High, which is called North High now.
Right.
There was no South High at the time. And I played in the band, and I played in the orchestra, and participated in some of the sports.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then did you go to college? Or?
I went to Colby Junior College.
Mm-hmm. Is that unusual for most of your friends go? Or?
I think most of them went. That was a junior college, actually. And I and my 2 other sisters all went there. There were 3 of us that went. And then branched out from there. And as a matter of fact, just had my 50th reunion.
Oh, that's fun.
From Colby.
Mm-hmm. And what did you study? What was it?
It was secretarial that I took. And then after that, I went into Boston to the School of Applied Art, LCK Chamberlain's School in Boston, and then ended up in a dental office.
Now, how did you make that transition?
Well, I was married for a while, and then the war years came, and after the war, my daughter and I came back here.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go in the interim?
During the war years?
Yeah.
My husband was with the company, and he was an advance agent for Lever Brothers, and this is a case of our living very short periods of time in many states. I moved 8 times in 2.5 years, and then eventually came back here and ended up in the dental office, of which is all part of the family. Mm-hmm. It was my uncle and cousin and brother who were in that office. I think I'm talking too much about my own personal things. Am I right or wrong?
Oh, no, that's fine.
You really?
Yeah. Okay. If you want, you can talk about, before, any changes you noticed from coming back to Newton Highlands.
Well, I don't think there were that many years ago. However, it did seem that the center of our activities here in the square were at this end, near the railroad station.
Mm-hmm.
And as years have gone by, things have spread towards the church and the high school. and more activity is down this end. Whereas Stevens Building, which is this large one here in the square, really now houses offices and, well, there are other stores in there. But at one time, everything was centered around a drugstore, which is at this corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm speaking of Lincoln and Walnut Street. And of course, we now have the MBTA, but years ago it was the railroad.
Yeah, that's how you'd get into Boston.
And you would, and there were never really any problems. The train, if it was supposed to leave at 8:17 in the morning, why, the conductor would stand there with his watch, and then it would be all aboard.
Is that how you'd have to get to school when you went to school in Boston?
Yeah, I did. I used the train, and school was located down in Boylston Street, so we'd get off at Huntington or Back Bay and coming back. It would be Huntington. Now, I have no idea whether those stations were there or not, because I didn't go to Boston. So,
now that it's easier, it's
right, it is easier, but it's just that there's no need.
Yeah.
One thing I remember years ago is coming home, you usually die of the heat of the cars, which had been sitting out in the sun in the railroad yard all day. And of course, if anyone dared to open a window, why, you'd end up with soot all over your clothes and your face. You know, from the coal that they used to get steam going for the
not
train.
too pleasant.
Not too pleasant. But it was friendly, traveling by train, and I always felt sorry for people who had to, come in and out of town by trolley, because they would usually, be hanging from a strap, whereas if and when you went by train, there was always an opportunity to sit down.
That's unique now.
And I remember one experience was that Franklin Roosevelt's youngest son, John, used to get on at Chestnut Hill. And I always kind of made room for him.
Just in case.
Yeah. So that, it was kind of interesting.
When you came back and you were working, I was just going to ask you if you could remember anything from the 20s, or if you were here, if you hadn't moved yet.
I was living here at the time in the 1920s, and I can remember the World War I ending, and at age 7, jumping up and down in the porch, yelling my brothers and sisters, not getting the full meaning of what had been going on, but knowing something pleasant had taken place.
Yeah. Did the Depression have any impact on you or your family? Or
I don't know that it did, really. My father was a physician, and I think maybe we were better off than some people. I'm sure probably there were many visits that he made that were, out of the goodness of his heart, but not much was said. It didn't really... I don't think we were really deprived. I'm sure that there were a lot of other people that found things a lot harder.
Yeah. When was it that you moved away first?
Oh, at the time I was married, I think unless you're talking about school. After high school, of course, that was in the 30s.
Right.
And I only had the 2 years in Colby, which was a junior college at that time, and came back here and was married in the late 30s, and that's when I moved away. And then in the early 40s is when I came back here, because my husband had gone into the service.
Oh.
And then things came to an end in 1945, and that was the year my daughter was born. And then from there we moved away from here for maybe another 10 years.
Where'd you move in
the interim? Back down to Rhode Island.
Oh.
Yeah. And which wasn't that far away. and I have been back here since, well, say around 1950.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had more years here than I have any place else, actually.
When you moved back, did you move back to this house or no?
I actually did.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, this house, they had in mind a need for more parking here in Newton because things were expanding here.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the city fathers came and put their finger on the map and said, this is the location that would be ideal for parking. In other words, this building, this barn, backs up to the stores on
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln Street. And it would be ideal. So for a whole year, I slept under the eaves on a cot, under those windows over there. Those windows weren't there at the time, actually. Waiting for the city to come to some conclusion as to whether they were going to take this property or not.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, they didn't. It would have been a pity to take the house and this here
Right.
for parking, but it's the same story now. They're always looking for parking. There's
Mhm.
never enough space. Even going way back then, and that was, I say, around 1950.
Yeah, how about the road, Walnut Street in general? Was it always so traveled?
Yeah, actually, that was the old 128
Oh.
originally, and I do recall many years ago the trolley itself
Mm-hmm.
running between here and Newtonville, and can also remember when it no longer ceased to function and removing the tracks and the rails and so forth.
Right.
And then it did become 128, and it was widened somewhat, not an awful lot. But it always has been traveled.
Did your daughter grow up here?
Yep, she grew up here in this house, and she went to Newton schools as I did, and lives not that far from here and has her family and 2 children.
To make the change over to being like a dental assistant, what do you actually have to do? Was it hard to change over to do that from?
Doing secretarial? Well,
Yeah.
actually, as a dental assistant, you would have a need for secretarial work.
Mm-hmm.
And there are schools for dental assistants, but it's not necessary. In the office where I've been, which involved my uncle and my cousin and my brother, who are all dentists, they've always trained their own dental assistants,
Mm-hmm.
which consists of certain duties, secretarial duties, plus a need to know how to take dental x-rays, and assisting the doctor, handing him certain instruments and so forth.
Have you noticed any change in what you did then to what you do now within,
No, I don't think so. There are newer ways of training dentists and so forth. Speaking of, they call it forehand dentistry, of which the dentist himself is seated.
Mm-hmm.
But if you haven't been trained that way, you don't fall into it that easily.
Mm-hmm.
What he does is done so mechanically. So our office is maybe a little bit old school.
Mm-hmm. How would you say, as a community, what did you feel when you were growing up, just start from there, that it was like a real kind of community spirit that you
I
had?
think very much so. We have the 2 churches here in Newton Highlands, the Episcopal Church, which actually borders on the property here.
Mm-hmm.
And at times it's been very high Episcopal, other times it's been very low Episcopal, depending on the rector that is there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always lots of activity over there. We happened to be Congregationalists. And it was a larger church, and it's been there some 100 years. Was not always in that original site, but I have always, maintained my membership there.
Mm-hmm.
and have participated in teaching Sunday school and
Oh, that's nice.
enjoy singing in the choir and so forth. And it does seem to be an important part of Newton Highlands.
Mhm.
And that it has fluctuated as far as membership is concerned. People come and go. We've had various pastors in the past that have perhaps attracted certain age groups.
Right. Would you say most people in that have stayed here? Do you know a lot of people that have stayed in this area?
We do have a lot of people that were born and brought up and are still living in their homes, such as my brother, who was born in this house over here.
Uh-huh.
And I can think of another family down the street where, next to the house in which I was born, he's always lived in that house.
Yeah.
And there have been some changes and renovations of houses close to the square, but fortunately not that many.
Yeah.
We have had some activity taking place here with of which I think we've gone about as far as we should, considering the size of the town. It just some of the changes have been to our benefit, but it does bring in a lot of people here and maybe help some of the merchants. And it's a case of how far do we go? And I think we're at a saturation point.
We're reaching one quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do for, like, when you were younger, what would you do for entertainment? Say,
Well, Saturdays we used to go to Newton Center. And there was a women's club, and there was always a movie each Saturday. There was also a serial which, continued from one Saturday to the next. That would be an attraction, of course. You couldn't miss out on that, like the Green Hornet something. And we've always had Crystal Lake, which there would be skating in the winter. Sometimes it was limited, depending on the winters. In the summer, there was swimming, but we, as a family, were never allowed to swim there. It was there were all kinds of bottles and things of that nature. As a matter of fact, I can recall at some point a team of horses falling through the ice.
Oh no!
So supposedly you didn't want to swim there anyway because there were dead horses in there. But they used to. It was always interesting to see them cutting the ice. The Blake blocks of ice.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an ice house too, situated there, which now is on. Let's see, is it Norwood Apartments? I think on Norwood Street, which is off of Center Street.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the site of the ice house many, many years ago. But we, as our family wasn't allowed, I think my father, being in the profession that he was, knew that there were too many ear infections and things of this nature, which all were due to that lake, of which wasn't that well fed by springs and so forth. However, now they have some sort of a, what do they call it? Something that circulates the water.
Okay.
Of which they continue to test it, I think, each day, and maybe more than that on hot days. But many years ago, it would be open for 3 days, and that would be the season. The bacteria count would be far too high.
How about when you came back? What would you do when you were like in the 40s? What kind of?
Oh, I think we had activities at church, young people's groups and so forth. and you have progressive dinners,
Right.
of which are somewhat being recreated right now, as a matter of fact. You know, go from one house to another, one course and then the second course.
Would you go into Boston, or did you just mainly stay in?
You could go to Boston. I don't know whether anybody has mentioned Nombega Park or not, which is in
Oh.
Auburndale. That's where the Marriott is now.
Uh-huh. Okay, I know.
And that place, they had all kinds of good bands and things over there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was within bounds as far as, you know, my family was concerned. I think perhaps my family were a little strict. More so with the girls than the boys.
Naturally.
Yeah, right. Probably do the same with my own. But there'd be skating parties and there'd be movies, things like that. It's terrible, isn't it? Trying to delve back into those years in the past. Of course, any of the school activities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were always putting on plays and things of that nature.
Right.
And I'm sure we kept busy in one fashion or another.
Would you say that the schools and just in general try to create, like I was talking before about a community type atmosphere, that like a real sense that Newton Highlands set off from the other towns in Newton?
Well, I don't think Newton Highlands was ever considered a very wealthy town. Newton Center and Waban, I'm sure, were more affluent. And maybe youngsters from those areas might have looked down on Newton Highlands, just like Newton Highlands might have looked down on another village or something like that. Perhaps there was a little feeling along that line.
Mm-hmm. What would set it apart? Just the...
Well, I think the background of and the wealth of the parents, perhaps. Maybe people in Newton Highlands were a little bit more modest, and perhaps didn't indulge their children quite as much as maybe families from Waban. Maybe I think it was money that set these areas apart. And possibly today. I don't know whether you get that same feeling or not. But that's people for you, or that's not people, that's young people for you. I mean, you know how she comes from Newton Center. You know, maybe their parents of some of the youngsters at that time had summer homes in Florida or things like that. Or maybe in the summer they had summer homes on the Cape.
You said before that you weren't allowed to go swimming at that
Yeah,
Crystal Lake. What would you do for most of your summer?
We all went to camp.
Oh.
But it would be at the interims before camp started and that. But we went to camp, most of us, for at least 6 weeks. And I had 2 other sisters, which I hadn't mentioned, that were older than I. And we 3 girls were born in this at 1099 Walnut Street, which is just a few houses from here. Whereas the 3 boys were born in this house over here. And they all had camp jobs and had camping experiences. The Girl Scouts were very active. Boy Scouts were very active during my years. Also, those campfires were perhaps not quite as active as Girl Scouts, but it just happened. And oh yes, there was the Vermont Bugle Corps, and which it was every Saturday morning, and you went over to West Newton Armory on Washington Street in West Newton, and we would participate in well, the whole state would gather maybe in the spring of the year, and there'd be competition amongst the scouts,
Right.
the troops, the drum and bugle corps, which is fun. Oh, and then to go back to drum and bugle and so forth, the high school had their bands, which was fun to participate in if you played an instrument, because you always got into all the games free. Just as the orchestra, any of the school plays and so
Mm-hmm. And are all your brothers doctors?
yeah, and my father, and who of course is not living, and my uncle and his son. We have, a couple of generations of doctors, but other families have generations of lawyers.
Right.
So that's, it just happens that way, and still in this area, which is nice too.
So did it have a kind of continuity with the offices? The offices in Newton Highlands? Or?
You're speaking of my brothers,
Mm-hmm.
do they? My brother is still in the main house where he was born,
Mm-hmm.
and using the office that my father practiced in for some 43 years. And he's been here since in the 40s. And another brother is a surgeon, and he's at Newton Wellesley Hospital. His home now is in Wayland.
Mm-hmm.
And his twin brother is the dentist for whom I work.
Mm-hmm.
And he has taken over this brick building, which is in back of this property here, where my uncle and his son were dentists. And so they are pretty much all in this area.
Mm-hmm. And they have the same kind of clients coming back, I'm sure, for long.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
nice.
Yeah. It's unfortunate my father didn't see them in their profession.
Mm-hmm.
But that, he must have instilled in them something.
Did your daughter, just going further up, but
Uh-huh.
did your daughter seem to find the same sense of, staying in Newton, or did she like growing up here? Do you remember how she...
Oh, I think she did. I think, I don't think she ever questioned it. She was only about 4 when we came back here from Rhode Island,
Mm-hmm.
so she hadn't started school.
Right.
So she had her from kindergarten on. She went through the Newton school system,
Mm-hmm.
and grew up here in the yard just as I grew up here, with the neighborhood kids and cousins and so forth. No, I'm afraid haven't ventured terribly far out of Newton in the last few years. For some reason, I don't, I'm perfectly content just to stay here.
Is it that there's more here, or there's just...
I think I've gotten older, and then I enjoy myself when I go, but no, I just think it's age. Perhaps you're not as restless as you were when you were younger, and not as adventuresome either.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems this is born and brought up in New England. Why this is where you belong.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to get away from that.
Since so much of your family's here too, it kind of...
Yeah. I have lived out in Ohio, and I was quite sure how sincere people were in different parts of, you can't call that West, really, the West at all. But I think we are stayed a little bit, stayed in this part of the country. We just, we're not sure. I don't know whether I want to say we're suspicious of people who are overly friendly or not. But
I think we are.
you do? Yeah. Okay. I just think once a New Englander, always a New Englander. So, where are you from, by the way?
From Connecticut.
Are you?
Yeah.
What part of Connecticut?
Reading, Connecticut. Oh, it's kind of near Danbury.
Oh, yeah.
In Fairfield County, it's down there.
Yeah. So you're New England.
Yeah, but I also used to live in Manhattan, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think, it would be different.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you could, let me just see if you had anything else you wanted to bring out about Newton Highlands?
Well, my feeling is that Newton Highlands has always been a very friendly neighborhood. And in spite of our expansion and growth in the last few years, I think people still remain friendly. Because I am here each day. I go out and buy the paper for the office, and I go and I pick up coffee, and so I'm constantly seeing these same faces. I may not know the people by name, but I do find that in time you get chatting with people while you're waiting for them to put up your coffee order or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of maintained a kind of nice atmosphere.
I think so.
Oh.
And I think this is what we want. I don't think we want this place to expand much more than it has. I think we're afraid we're going to lose this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think particularly if Hyde School closes, I think it is going to be a sad day. And they certainly have worked on this. I don't happen to have many children there, but I support the school remaining open.
Mm-hmm.
The church in itself has allowed people to use their facilities. The Hyde School has used them for plays and so forth since the fire that was a few, 4 years ago now in the spring. There's always been a certain giving and taking in respects to that, as the Episcopal Church has been generous too.
Mm-hmm.
In allowing people to come in and use their facilities. We did have the original Brighams here, and that was a little disappointing. I can remember Mr. and Mrs. Brigham when they first started with cars lined around the block, around 2 blocks, 3 blocks, waiting to get, their ice cream cone. And I felt badly about that.
Why did you feel badly?
It was the original Brighams.
Right.
And Mr. and Mrs. Brigham started their business here. They sold out at some point and went to New Hampshire.
Oh.
And I think they felt sorry they had. I mean, it was the first Brighams, just the same 5 and 10 that we had here. Was the first one that was self-service.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had the first A&P here in Newton Highlands.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first self-service
Right.
one. And you hate to see those go. Originally, across the street where the Newton Waltham Bank is now, was an Oddfellows building. This is where my uncle started his dental practice. And also in that building, on the second floor, was an assembly room where the Oddfellows met, but we also were able to have our dancing classes there. Of course, this is all ballroom.
Right.
There was one other room on the first floor that I remember, which there was a music teacher who lived and taught there.
Mm-hmm.
You hate to see these things go, but
When you say go, you mean they've gone out of business?
the buildings were torn down and replaced.
Oh.
And actually that bank building over there at one time housed a gift shop as well as a lunchroom, I believe. But then eventually the bank took it all over. The post office wasn't always where it was.
Mhm.
That's an added block on there. Those are about the only changes I can think of at the moment.
Just about work. Did most of your friends work in the neighborhood, or did they have to go into, or people that you knew, did they
At
work?
the time I finished school,
Mhm.
you didn't work in your neighborhood. You went
Right.
to Boston. That
Right.
was the thing to do. You didn't. You couldn't imagine working in the little town where you lived. I mean, it just.
Right.
And I did. I worked in Jordan Marsh Company. Actually, when I left there, I was secretary to the secretary of the president, which was all title and no pay. And I'll tell you what I earned a week. It was $16.50.
Not too grand.
No. And then after during the war, I worked in Stearns, where I did hire and fire, personnel work.
Mhm.
So, but that was the thing to do. I mean, you went to Boston. You didn't work out here.
Mhm. Do most of the women you knew worked, or?
Nobody's mother worked particularly.
Mhm.
If you were married and you had a family, that was your profession. You stayed home and took care of the children. I think most of them did. It wasn't the need.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some, but most mothers stayed put. So there's been a change along those lines, certainly.
Yeah. Great deal.
Which I don't know whether it's good or bad. I feel sorry for the youngsters, and I feel sorry also that I think the parents are being deprived of seeing certain growth in their own children.
Mm.
I just think they have missed a lot of which there's no way that can be substituted.
Right.
You have to
Be there
you
to
have
experience.
to be there. Yeah, you really do. And that first time that child walks, so those first few words, what a shame to miss them.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Yeah, it really do. But, nowadays, I think it's definitely economically there are reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Just one last question, then. I'm just going to ask you if there's any, one or two things that you can think that make Newton Highlands unique for you, or that that would be really the key thing that sets it off from anywhere else.
I think it's partially the size of it. It's not as small as Woburn. Mm-hmm. It is smaller than Newton Center. There are changes going on at Newton Connor. Newtondale is large. Auburndale is larger. I think we're pretty much centered with our churches and our schools in the heart of the Highlands. And this is why I think so many of us are opposing any more expansion here. I think we're all afraid we're going to lose that.
Yeah.
And I don't think the people here in Newton Highlands have the tendency to pack up and move away. I think we're all pretty content. And a lot of young couples have come in and are enjoying the larger houses with the Victorian atmosphere and so forth, and have purposely moved into Newton Highlands with the hopes of their children having a school to go to, which at this point is
right.
in question.
Yeah.
No, I just think there's something about it that is a little unique, and I just think people are sincere and real neighborly, and it has always been that way.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I really do. You know. Well, hopefully I have made some contributions tonight. I don't know what it is.